because I hope this is not going to be a relaxing session. I think it's, we have the privilege of having really people that qualify for, I would call them first movers, people who are really deploying things. Merci. So I think it's an important session because I believe as a chair of the member states for the JTI that what we need is people who are experiencing how difficult it is to do something new in a world which is maybe not prepared for something, such a big leap forward. So I'm very grateful for the people who have accepted to participate in this session. The first one is Klaus Bahnhof, who really plays a very important role as managing director of NOW. Everybody knows this extraordinary effort that Germany is pulling for developing really a new way, a new approach to energy. So Klaus has been very successful in deploying infrastructure, deploying really all the things that you can expect from a powerful government as Germany. Olivier Onidi is really somebody who, for us, is very important because he has a perspective from DG Move as a managing director, and we're very pleased to have DG Move because we think that you're really part of deployment, and we welcome you with great pleasure. Ito-san is really somebody who has the vision of NEDO. NEDO, I suppose everybody knows NEDO, this technology agency from the Ministry of Industry. It's a very well-oiled system where technology here is very well supported by Japan, and he will give us an overview of what I would call Japanese development. So it's not one development, but it's a country development. On the contrary, Darrell Wilson is the CEO of Hydrogenics. I thought first when I met him that he was really truly Canadian, and then he told me, but 50% of my work, you know, and my business is in Europe. So we're very pleased to have you, Darrell, because you are somebody who had probably some difficult times to get where you are, and we will profit from your experience. And last but not least, we have this company, Intelligent Energy from the UK. We have Dennis Hayter, who really is participating in something which is seen from France, really something very nice, because it's a company that is represented all over the world now, and small company, well-focused, and there are a number of them in the UK, and I think we will learn also about that. So after that, I would like to start directly. I won't tell you the title of each talk. I will just ask people to really present what they have to present, and I'm very happy to have you all around me. So Klaus, you're first, and this is a simple system. It's green to go ahead, red to go backwards. And what I will ask all of you is to try to keep in time, but if you have something important, my advice, say it first, because otherwise people might cut you. Thank you very much. Klaus, go ahead.
Bernard, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm sure you will stop me if I go too long. I'm pretty sure that that happens. Now I know what Victor meant when he said it's blinded. It's actually hard to see anything, so I'm just looking out in the nowhere, hoping you can at least hear me well. I want to talk about hydrogen infrastructure, the activities we're doing in Germany, but also looking a little bit at the European perspective. The title is Linking the H2 Mobility Plan to EU Deployment Strategy. Before I go there, actually just a few thoughts on what we heard this morning. I think it is important that we have the program on a European basis, which is pretty similar structured in Germany as well. We have a German program that we're implementing as NOW. We're working together. These programs are complementary one to the other. We wish there were more member states that would have a stronger program on hydrogen and fuel cells. This is important to build the industry base and to really get us moving forward on the energy system and on climate issues. So really I'm focusing on transportation, but remember stationary fuel cells, other opportunities for fuel cells are important as well and need to be taken forward. Now, talking about hydrogen and fuel cells in the transportation sector these days is sometimes challenging because people, when they hear sustainable mobility and zero emission mobility and electric mobility, they think about batteries. And after the hype we've had around hydrogen some 10 years ago and the then following hype on biofuels, we're now in a battery hype which might already be towards its end. And after all these years talking about different options being the silver bullet, I think we have all learned that no, there's not that one silver bullet. It is really a portfolio that we need, which is a portfolio on the fuel side as well as a portfolio on the powertrain side. And if we really are serious about zero emission mobility, mobility based on renewable fuels, I think the learning up till now is that hydrogen and fuel cells and batteries are key components, are key technologies to get us there, and we need to do the right things to move forward. In Germany, we have two different programs, or more than that, but two I want to talk about because these are the programs that we are directly implementing. We have one on battery electric mobility, which were the model regions in the past, and we continue to do model regions and continue to do large-scale demonstration on battery electric vehicles. This does include hybrid technologies as well. And we have the NIP, the National Innovation Program for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells, which is at least half of it covering hydrogen and fuel cells in transportation. And talking about electric mobility, we have the understanding that this whole portfolio is what we need to move us forward. And again, batteries and hydrogen and fuel cells are a key or are key technologies in this field. Now I want to touch upon basically four main headlines. The first is where are we today, what are we doing today? The second one is what is our plans in moving forward near term, the next 2 to 3 years. The third one is how do we actually, based on that experience that we do have and will make, how do we roll this out in a commercial way? And the fourth one is looking at the European perspective, because Germany alone as a market is definitely not large enough for the OEMs to move these things forward. The energy system, climate issues are not national issues. They're even not European issues, but they're global ones, so we need to have this working together. Now, where are we today? We have ongoing demonstration of fuel cell vehicles in the public, including refueling of these vehicles. In Germany, in our program, we cluster the individually funded project in the Clean Energy Partnership, which really brings together the car industry, the supply industry, the energy industry, the gas industry. And you can see here that all major OEMs that are heavily working on fuel cell technologies are part of our program. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, just a couple of comments which I think are worthwhile doing. You can see that, yes, there are European companies, but yes, there are also Asian companies, Asian OEMs, quite actively involved in our program in Germany. I believe at this point in time, public 700 bar refueling, Germany is a good place to go. It's a good place to field test these vehicles, to test the infrastructure alongside with it, and I think this is one of the reasons why probably we see Asian companies and foreign companies being quite engaged in our program as well. Second observation is that it's not only passenger cars, it is about public transport as well. We have a few buses in Hamburg. Actually, this generation of fuel cell buses showing twice the efficiency of the previous fuel cell buses, so we see huge achievements that took place. Just as a general remark, most of the OEMs mentioned on this slide have publicly stated that they would start commercial rollout of the vehicles anywhere around 2015 and beyond. So we are really at a point where we need to plan for the right infrastructure and the right environment to get these vehicles out. And if you have a chance to drive these vehicles, you'll find that, hey, it's a normal car. It just drives. Yes, it's too expensive. That's something we need to work on. Yes, there are not enough stations around. This is something we need to work on. But these cars really, compared to 5 years ago, have done tremendous achievements. So they are coming, and the OEMs are serious, is what our impression is in our program. Now, alongside with the cars, we need infrastructure. This shows the hydrogen stations that we have in our program at this point in time in Germany, most of them in operation, some still being under construction or being planned. All of them offer 700 bar gaseous hydrogen. All of them are publicly accessible. All of them follow the international protocols that are agreed within the industry at this point in time. So I think we have a pretty good proving ground, if you want to test the vehicles and to test the infrastructure. The safety of the stations was proven and still is being proven. Refueling standards are agreed and are being worked on to finalize them. There is on the technology side still some work to do on storage and hydrogen compression. And it's just important to operate these stations to really optimize the operation. Hydrogen supply chains are being tested. The goal of the Clean Energy Partnership is to have at least 50% hydrogen from CO2-free sources, and this is mainly power that is certified from renewable power or directly wind power, and also some biomass to hydrogen pathways. So this is all being tested today. This is one example of how wind power gets into the tank of these vehicles, and we've heard this morning already a couple of times how important hydrogen is in the context of increasing the share of renewables in the power sector, so basically as a storage medium. You can see here on the left-hand side of the slide what we call hybrid power plant, a little north of Berlin, 150 kilometers north of Berlin, where wind power, excess wind power is used to produce hydrogen. Some of that hydrogen can be mixed even with biogas to then reconvert it to power and heat, or you can take hydrogen directly and truck it to the nearby station. This is what we're doing actually here with one of the stations in Berlin. So this process is being demonstrated. And what is important next to the technology is that this is a fairly small company that is investing into this technology because they see a business case coming up linking energy management on the power sector with high share of renewables with the transportation sector. And once you have produced this hydrogen based on renewables, the most CO2 efficient way to use it is really within transportation. So this is something that we need to support further, and we need to find the right policy framework to motivate this further. Now, second headline, what's being planned next, and these are confirmed plans. This was our Minister for Transportation, Dr. Peter Ramsauer, announcing in June that the German government would further support the build of hydrogen infrastructure. 50 stations until 2015 is the goal within the Clean Energy Partnership. You've seen the map of already existing stations, so there are some 35 stations missing. We have commitment from industry partners to co-share these activities. So actually we're moving forward to build 50 stations until 2015 with two major scopes. One is to continue R&D, to continue to test innovative technologies, to continue to increase lifetime and durability, to continue to decrease the cost of these technologies, but also to make sure that around the time frame of 2015, we have at least initial infrastructure in place so that an early rollout of vehicles can be supported. And we're trying to, of course, not only trying to, I think we will manage to get these 50 stations lined up in a way that we cover the main metropolitan areas in Germany, but also make sure that we have corridor stations connecting these urban areas so you can really travel across the country. And later on you'll see hopefully also across the border of Germany to other countries. But this is really the commitment from the German government at this point in time to move things forward And here the Ministry of Transportation is very strong in its message saying we need all these technologies, and hydrogen and fuel cells are part of a future sustainable model. Just a few topics in regards to R&D. I said, yes, we have a need to continue R&D around the filling station. The hydrogen filling itself has to be optimized. The protocol has to be optimized for commercial use. Hydrogen quality is an ongoing discussion which is very important. Once you start selling fuel on a commercial basis, you need to have appropriate standards and quality protocols. So this is something that has to be agreed upon. Leak-proofness test of the filling system. So how do you actually certify a station once it's built? How do you make sure that it's safe for operation? Procedures have to be identified there. And hydrogen flow measurement as one specific item is important. So the accuracy of measuring the amount of hydrogen that goes into the vehicle does require some more work. These are a few examples of work and working groups within the Clean Energy Partnership, but we really see the need to have that discussion not only on a national but also on a European and on a global level, and this is something that we want to drive forward to engage with the other regions in the world that are actively doing demonstrations, so we actually have a global system moving forward, so we don't get into the same discussion as the batteries guys do with, you know, what plug to use in which country. I think we're far beyond that, and we really have a good basis to move this forward together. Now, third headline, how are we moving even beyond that? What is the situation regarding commercial rollout? In the end, this is about commercially operating fuel cell vehicles and hydrogen stations in a mass market environment. That's our goal. That's what we have to achieve. In Germany, a number of companies have joined forces some time ago under the initiative of H2 Mobility. And later on, more and more companies joined the joint analysis that we did. And you can see the logos of the companies that are involved in this analysis. You can see the large car companies, you can see oil companies, gas companies, utilities, supply industry. And I think this is a very important message. You need to have this cross-sectoral cooperation to actually move things forward. And it is about the right balance between ramping up vehicles and infrastructure, ramping up renewable hydrogen production versus cost issues, looking into station operation and reducing the cost there. So this group here has done an analysis as a basis for commercial rollout. And the goal is really together, collectively, invest into a joint entity that would then ultimately operate and build and operate hydrogen stations in Germany. A few key figures, we're aiming towards around about 1,000 stations to cover all of Germany. The good news is that long term there is a viable business case to sell hydrogen in the market. The bad news is if you look at it only for the next 5 years, there's no reason coming out of a classical investment environment to invest. So this is what we're now starting to look into some more detail. What's the right model to share that risk in a public-private endeavor? And this is what we're looking to do in the next step. And some of the companies here have already decided to go that way further and to go into that direction. Of course, it is important to slowly ramp up the production of renewable hydrogen. So overall, the goal is finally to have a CO2-free hydrogen production all the way, but that doesn't happen overnight. Even existing hydrogen, whether byproduct or coming from natural gas, already reduces well-to-wheel CO2 quite a bit. So that is a start, but yes, we need a plan to ramp up hydrogen from CO2-free sources. Now, we can't do this in Germany alone. We are part of Europe, and again, the industry needs the European market to take this forward. So there are quite a few member states or regions in Europe that have started similar activities in their analyses. For quite a while, of course, there is the Scandinavian Hydrogen Highway Partnership. And just yesterday, I think it was in the press that some of the OEMs have signed a memorandum of understanding with Scandinavian governments to introduce fuel cell vehicles into Scandinavia. So we see some good activities there. Switzerland is looking into what can they do in their very specific situation. There is a UK H2 mobility, and I think Dennis will talk about that later. And also there is some dynamic here in France towards an analysis of H2 mobility. So this is important that industries, together with governments, do the planning. How can a commercial ramp-up look like? And then trying to come up with a more European overall scheme. We have started, and this is under the lead of the government of the Netherlands, a project under the 10T program, which is looking into building stations in some of the member states that have not done so yet, looking into national scenarios, but also really trying to come up with a European scenario how a rollout of hydrogen stations could look like. This is just now starting. I think this is very important, and some things I've learned this morning, the new frames coming up, I think it will be important beyond the R&D. And yes, of course, we need to continue onto the Horizon 2020, the R&D activities, the demo activities, but beyond that, to really find the right instruments, including public support, to commercially build up the infrastructure. To summarize a little bit, the message is mobility with hydrogen fuel cell is feasible and does offer long-term a viable business case. Successful market ramp-up does not happen overnight, and it probably doesn't happen, or even not happen fast enough, in a business-as-usual environment, and it does require commitment from all stakeholders involved, public and private. It does require continuity in R&D, but also in a stable policy framework. And it does require cooperation across industries, industry with academia and politics, not only nationally, but also EU-wide and globally. Thank you very much.
We will go directly to our next speaker, Olivier Onidi.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the Chair asked me to start with the most important, so the most important to me would be to address a few words of thank you to the Joint Undertaking for holding this General Assembly here in Paris. I think it's not only the greatest city in the world for me, but it is also an important signal, and a signal that you actually actively also going into the outreach towards member states, and I would really encourage you to continue doing this. The session we have had yesterday evening with the senator was extremely telling. I think such an important actor as France, which has had some doubts, which is now trying to really push forward some ambitious plans in the sector of interest to you. And there are many other situations like this in various member states of the European Union. In Brussels, you don't decide. You propose in Brussels, you implement in Brussels, but I think the decisions are very much made in member states. And this is really a strong message to you to try to continue to join forces with the member states and go towards them, meet with their local, national politicians, with the various industry in order to build up your case and facilitate rollout. Second word of appreciation, of course, is to the Joint Undertaking, not for this stakeholder session, but overall for the work conducted so far. And of course, when I speak about the Joint Undertaking, I would like very much to pay tribute to all those of you here in this room and others who have contributed so far to the activities of the Joint Undertaking. It was quite a challenge. I would also like to say clearly that we're very proud of the results achieved. We are very proud also of the commitment of all of you. And we are extremely also enthusiastic to see that the family is growing with new members, such as lately Michelin, which demonstrate basically that there is a very wide interest, and that is probably also the best reward you can get to see that very, very strong partners are actually continuing to join your activities. You have so far achieved, I think, two important things for us. You have managed to concentrate funding on a meaningful program of activities. You have concentrated on R&D, but you have also made the effort to spell the different consequences and also look at us with very concrete proposals as to facilitate the market intake of what you are working on. You have also overall, I think, made a decisive contribution, especially in these times of uncertainties, as to what type of alternative fuel should become really the basis for the future. You have, I think, made a very important contribution in what has just been illustrated, which is the fact that there is no one solution. It is a complementarity of solution. Looking at the different solutions, I think as policymakers, we have to be extremely attentive to give each a chance, to give each the best chance of success, and trying also to work out with you the real complementarity between the different solutions for the mobility of tomorrow. What will we be doing on the basis, I think, of the work initiated so far, and I think with a particular focus, of course, on infrastructure? I think there are really 5 paths we would like to pursue, very much in the perspective of transport policy, but transport policy with an important research component. The first one would be, of course, to encourage much to continue. So we are still in a process, and it is an important, very serious process of ex post evaluation of what has been achieved. But I think it is fair to say that we would like to see the joint undertaking to continue its activities. I don't think we would like the activities to dramatically change. I think you have probably demonstrated that you define the right mix of activities. We would probably encourage you in 2 directions. First, to make sure that governing board meetings are more about strategy and content than about administration, please. I think there must be ways to empower the director in good intelligence with the chair of the managing board and with good information of all partners to take these decisions. And us basically concentrate on the substance. And as to the substance, I would also like the joint undertaking to be more active in regularly updating the master plan that constituted, I would say, the nucleus of the definition of your activities, which has dramatically changed. The world has changed throughout the years of what has been produced by the joint undertaking. With, again, a strong emphasis on the 3 aspects which are relevant to us. What is still needed in terms of research in all different areas. What we need as public policymakers to provide in terms of regulation at large, so including, of course, standards. And don't hesitate to be very outspoken on standards. And the third aspect, of course, the financing, which is critical. I mean, there was a strong outcry, if I understand well, this morning about the financing. Of course, in these times it is difficult. But we have instruments. We have instruments, but we need to fine-tune this with you in order to make the best use of these instruments. So what are the instruments we would be working on in the coming years, I would say? The first is a non-financial instrument. That's why I start with that one. It is the result, I think, of the work conducted within the joint undertaking, but also work orchestrated in quite a number of forums, member states representatives, industry representatives, cross-board technology centers. For hydrogen, like for other alternative fuels, we basically came to the conclusion that together with the many activities we have been following and sponsoring, there are 2 critical aspects which are still missing. One is the standard, not so much a problem for your world, but certainly a definite problem for the electric world. And you're very close to that one, and you will also face similar problematics in terms of communication, protocols, etc. So we will come up with legislative proposals before the end of the year, I think in November it is planned, which would basically set the standards that should be applied for the various alternative fuels from natural gas to hydrogen. We would also, and this is really the novelty which came out of all the work conducted with you, we would also set in legislation a number of quantitative targets as to the infrastructure built out necessary, we believe, either to bring products on the market at a much higher pace than they currently do, or continue or accelerate the validation. And of course, we will have a differentiation from one fuel to the other. It will not be a surprise to you that, of course, hydrogen will be part of that. We will have quantifiable targets. We will, of course, leave a wide discretion to member states as to how they implement these targets and what type of instruments they would be using, legislative or financial means, or both. But we will insist very much on, in the hydrogen field, that the necessary rollout is first and foremost to demonstrate the technology at wide scale. And of course, an embedded mechanism in the legislation which will allow regularly to take stock of the degree of maturity of the technology, the type of step forwards that would have occurred, and if need be, to translate that into new targets in some further mandatory obligations or other issues that might be raised. So this is a very important piece of a proposal, because it's also a little bit different in nature, and we hope that you will still stand on our side in order to promote it and explain again at all national levels how important this is. It is not about Brussels dictating national mobility or energy choices, but it is Brussels working jointly with all parties interested in order to give the best chance to European technology and European companies to actually develop their activities in some critical fields. Second aspect, very important, we are committed to maintain and even increase in the trans-European network environment a strong incentive, financial incentive for new alternative fuel experiments and rollout in terms of infrastructure. The Connecting Europe facility, which will be the financial arm of the Trans-European network, will have a strong innovation component. And again, one of the possibilities we envisage is to see to what extent what has been successfully done in aeronautics or on satellite technology could not be done also in your field of activity, and why we could not have a blending of financing for the joint undertaking. So not only rely on research and development funding, but possibly if activities of deployment are being decided and put in your remit, also see to what extent this trans-European network instrument can be used. Knowing that both in Horizon 2020 research and the trans-European network context, a very strong link with EIB instruments will be available. EIB instruments, of course, being loans, but I think they have proved, including in this field, their attractiveness, and I think the EIB has also confirmed on a number of occasions its determination to push forward these type of innovative initiatives. The third aspect I wanted to mention is the urban dimension. Here again, we will be coming next year in June with a policy package which will here as well contain some legislative measures. Hydrogen being so important to mobility, mobility being so important to urban policies, we are definitely here again in an area where to help cities meet all the different objectives and targets and obligations that have been imposed on them, and facing all the many problems in terms of emissions, but also mobility they have. We will certainly also there want to discuss with you and identify a number of measures that could be put into this urban proposal in order to push forward hydrogen solution. I'm thinking notably, of course, on large fleets, but more in particular, of course, the public transport networks. Finally, we have just started the review of the public procurement directive. I must say I'm not very happy with the results. Not only has it not been taken, I think, as seriously as it should have by member states, or at least some member states, but there again, I think we are determined to try to screw a little bit the instrument in order to get a bit more of an offensive promotion of new technologies, and have what is, of course, one of the main instruments for public purchases available with a strong technology bias, I would say, in a positive manner. Let me just finish reminding you, and this is very much linked to the first word of praise and encouragement I try to deliver to you, that as policymakers we rely very much on science, on technological developments, but I think it is a two-way street. We have, of course, also the obligation in public policy to set up the instruments that are needed in order to accelerate these new technologies. Notably, of course, in a world that is increasingly competitive, and of course, and I'm not shy to say this here, it is, of course, very important to us that the European knowledge, the European, I think, state-of-the-art in a field like hydrogen is further supported. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Ito-san from NEDO. He will speak about Japan deployment program.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Floa, and thank you for the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Tadashi Ito from NEDO, Japan. NEDO stands for New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization. And frankly speaking, NEDO is a funding agent for R&D under Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. So let me begin my presentation by this slide, introducing commercialization scenario of FCB and hydrogen infrastructure in Japan. So as you are very well aware, there is a chicken and egg issue around FCB and hydrogen infrastructure. Namely, nobody buys FCB without refilling stations, and nobody invests in refilling stations without consumers. So in order to cut such chicken egg issue, Japan has already decided to invest in refueling stations first, as shown in red line on this picture, followed by FCB sales, shown in blue line. Okay. And at this moment, we are at 2012, and 2015 is considered as the target year to begin the commercialization of both FCB and hydrogen infrastructure. Okay. Therefore, we are now under demonstration phase, and we are preparing the transition phase from demonstration to commercialization. Okay. And the information resource of this picture is shown at the bottom of this picture, which is Fuel Cell Commercialization Conference of Japan, or FCH-JU. So let me draw your attention to FCH-JU. So it is an industry group, consists of hundreds of companies in Japan, including OEMs or energy suppliers or heavy industries or fuel cell suppliers and so on and so on. So one of the major activities of them is lobby activity in Japan. That's why they produced this picture, and this picture is very widely shared in Japan. So then next, let me introduce Japan's phased approach and in relation to the policy. And in energy policy, fuel cell and hydrogen is construed as an important technology for energy conservation and global warming due to high energy efficiency, and there's not any CO2 emission from the tailpipe when it is operated. And in practice, we are now carrying out demonstration project called JHFC3, which stands for Japan Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Demonstration Project, Phase 3, which commenced in 2011 and which will be operated till 2015. And we are now preparing something for pre-commercial phase. And in Japan, during the pre-commercial phase from 2013 to 2015, 100 hydrogen refueling stations are considered to be built with governmental subsidy. Okay. And from 2015, as an early commercial phase, business will be launched. Okay. That's our planned phased approach to commercialization from demonstration. So this slide introduces our demonstration projects. So at the moment, the project is mainly executed by a research association named Research Association of Hydrogen Supply Utilization Technology, or HISAT. So HISAT is another key player in Japan for hydrogen deployment. Okay. And at the moment, 16 refueling stations are being operated, and they are now building 3 more refueling stations. So within this fiscal year, by the end of next March, Japan will have 19 refueling stations for demonstration. And at the moment, 50 FCVs, including buses and passenger vehicles, are operated under the plan by HISAT. So this slide shows the key major players for the demonstration project of JHFC3. And if you will see your handouts later, you can find out the key energy suppliers or gas companies or OEMs or local governments who are related to this project. So this slide introduces the reference information on the subsidy. So I'd like to introduce the subsidy program for residential fuel cell or micro combined heat and power for residential houses. So Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, or METI, introduced a subsidy program for NFAM, which is the name of this combined heat and power, in fiscal year 2009. And the column highlighted in yellow shows the amount of money of the subsidy for per unit. And as you can see, the amount of money per unit gradually decreases from 2009 to 2012. And the program, the subsidy program, will end in 2015. And then after that, independent business for NFAM will be commenced. And on the other hand, I'd like to introduce something about OEM movements. And in Paris Motor Shows, some of you may have already seen Nissan's Terra, which is a new concept car for FCB. And Toyota has already displayed their concept car in Tokyo Motor Show. And Honda is now developing their new cars for or new passenger vehicles at the moment. And rumors say they will sell FCB in 2014 or 15, which are the target year, or before the target year for commercialization. And before closing my presentation, let me introduce overall picture of NEDO funded project around hydrogen and fuel cell. Although my presentation rather concentrated on FCB and hydrogen infrastructure. So we found various projects, including PFC or SOFC for power generation, or hydrogen storage, or hydrogen production, delivery, and storage, which is hydrogen supply chain for refueling stations, or what we call hydrogen science, which means, say, hydrogen embrittlement or its fundamental property under very high pressure or very low temperature and so on. And the bottom column shows our demonstration projects. And our budget is approximately 100 million euro per annum. That's approximately our budget for these years. So at the end, let me summarize my presentation. So I introduced Japan's commercialization scenario and our phased approach from demonstration to commercialization. And then next, I introduced our demo project, JHFC3 by HISAT, 19 refueling stations and 50 SVs. And as a reference of subsidy, I introduced NFARM subsidy program from 2009 to 2015. And auto OEMs are developing their FCBs. And at the end, I introduced NEDO's budget for the various projects in relation to hydrogen and FCB and fuel cell. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Darrell Wilson.
Good afternoon. It's an honor and privilege to join with you in this session, and I thank the organizers for the invitation. As I sat here this morning and listened, I couldn't help but think what a unique construct Europe is. Perhaps those of you who live here and work here don't really appreciate the depth of collaboration and sophisticated cooperation that goes on between your member states. It's something that we don't enjoy in North America. And although we share some of the economic problems of the current day, you have something very special here, and I'd encourage you to appreciate it as you enjoy the session. I want to share some very practical insights that come from the deployment of hydrogen fueling stations throughout the world, and I'm hoping that some of these reflections will be helpful as you look forward to the next steps in Europe. So 5 challenges and 5 proposed solutions. The 5 challenges are first the challenge to innovate, then the challenge around funding and cost, the challenge to preserve the green attributes associated with hydrogen fueling, the challenge to find fresh business models, and finally the challenge to think differently about energy systems. I'm going to walk through these very quickly in the limited time available, but happy to chat and answer questions later if we've provoked any fresh thinking. There are more than 300 hydrogen fueling stations already deployed around the world, 45 of which we've had direct involvement in supporting with electrolysis technology or completely building the station. And inevitably, it's time to pause for a moment and reflect and look at the positive, negative points, and some interesting points that arise from this deployed base around the world. Here's an example of a recently deployed station along with our friends at Waterstorfnet in Belgium, just opened this year. Another in association with Air Liquide in Oslo, Norway, also opened just recently. And the first challenge is perhaps a little bit of a self-criticism. When I look at what we do in these stations, and I was talking with our sales director about this just last night, he observed that maybe there just hasn't been enough innovative thinking gone into these stations. We tend to do in these deployments and work with what we have rather than challenge and meet the needs for the future. Now, in each of these challenges, I'm going to highlight a positive approach, an exception to the problem, and in this case, the work of Linda. Learning from a lot of the deployments that have already happened in Europe where compression technology presented many of the problems and operational issues, Linda adopted a new compression technology which is actually on display in the display area here at the show. Ionic compression, a big innovation and a different approach, but unfortunately innovation has been somewhat rare in the deployment of fueling stations. Our own next contribution to innovation in this area will be the future deployment of megawatt-class PEM electrolysis. And one of the important things here is the spatial improvement that comes from PEM electrolysis in the fueling station application. Where typically we would deploy 1 or 2 megawatts of electrolysis today, we will be able in the same place to deploy 12 megawatts, enough to fuel 1,000 cars with on-site fueling, a major breakthrough, and something that we believe we can do cost effectively. And so some suggestions around this area of innovation, perhaps in future JTI initiatives, there needs to be a further focus on driving innovation and not just picking up existing technology to be adopted into projects, and perhaps some setting of targets so that we focus on the right innovation areas. And here I'm not talking about small-scale, marginal innovation with nascent technology. I'm talking about looking at that situation when we have 1,000 hydrogen fueling stations. What do they need to look like, and how do we need to innovate to reach levels of that kind of deployment? And that will take, of course, ongoing technology road mapping. Here again, the self-criticism. This is what we do for industrial customers all over the world with more than 450 deployments of industrial electrolysis technology. And this is the same box we put on many of the fueling stations that we delivered. We can do better. We think we all collectively need to do better when it comes to innovation. A recently opened station here, along with our partners Linde Gas in Hamburg, the largest station in Europe, at a megawatt. It doesn't really fuel that many vehicles, although it's the largest station. If we deploy our new technology around PEM electrolysis at the megawatt class, we can increase the amount of vehicles fueled at this station by 6 times, a major breakthrough. The second area of focus for improvement or challenge is the issue of cost and funding. I attended a session in Washington back in April this year, and Dr. Larry Burns, the gentleman who led the R&D program at General Motors over many decades in hydrogen and electrification, raised his hands in lament and said, you know, it's kind of crazy when I think about it. All the billions of dollars that have gone into development of this powertrain platform, and we look at the amount of money that's actually required to deploy the initial fueling infrastructure to get a very substantial traction. It pales in comparison to what's already been spent on the development of the powertrain platform. So we need to think in balance and perspective over the last 15 years about the money that's already been spent in development, and the true marginal cost by comparison is not so high. But there are challenges. One of the positive approaches to this challenge has been taken, many of you will be aware of the work out of Japan led by Mitsui and looking at developments all around the world with a starting point of saying, what if you had to deploy 100 stations? How would you do it? What would they cost? Where are the opportunities for cost reduction? It's this kind of thinking that will move us ahead for cost reduction. In our own activity here, as we worked with the Mitsui Challenge and other discussions we've had with partners around the world, we believe there are very substantial cost reduction opportunities if we start to think about proper full-scale deployments in significant numbers. My favorite word when it comes to cost reduction is eliminate. There's parts of the system that just simply need to be eliminated so the cost and the components go. And then finally, integration with storage and stabilization, a topic I'm going to address in a moment, will also be a substantial improvement in the overall cost profile. So here, in a very typical industrial cost reduction point of view, we need to carefully go through all of the elements of the cost involved in deploying fueling infrastructure and looking how we might reduce them. Some of them are soft costs. In some of the stations that have been recently deployed, the amount of work and engineering hours that goes into the management of risk and safety are very substantial. And if we start to look at how to migrate some of those best practices between deployments, we'll save a lot of money. And of course, the good work of H2 Mobility and looking at the co-deployment of fueling infrastructure along with vehicles makes a lot of sense and can also drive cost reduction. Another example of a station recently deployed in Switzerland, you get a sense of the bulk and the protection around the station from a safety and risk management point of view. Again, I raise the point, what is the best way to do this from a safety point of view, and how do we migrate those best practices around the world? Next is the challenge to preserve the green attributes of the hydrogen powertrain system. And here I know I have a vested interest as one of the major producers of electrolyzers in the world. But why should we give up half of the value and pick up less than fully green streams when it comes to providing fuel for these vehicles? If I look at the Department of Energy profile of greenhouse gas emissions from the various powertrains, you can see there is an opportunity here to make a 90% improvement in the greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions of these vehicles per mile driven. Why should we settle for just 55%? It's not actually necessary. And if we work together and innovate together and focus on cost reduction, we actually can realize the full benefit of this new technology platform. Some recommendations in this area is to incentivize a focus on green hydrogen. It's common to pass this off as something that will come in time as a challenge that maybe we're not up to right now. That's not a view that we support. We believe this is a challenge that can be met today, and a substantial part of this infrastructure can fully realize the 90% reduction opportunity that's available. Again, the next scale technology that we're offering at very high levels of efficiency and very high power densities will enable us to deliver cost-effectively the full value of the reduction in CO2 emissions on this alternative powertrain. And so also we would challenge in future GATI initiatives to make a substantial allocation of funding support for the green pathway to hydrogen rather than just open calls. And this is something that's been done in California, where there is an appreciable difference in the incentive for green hydrogen over other pathways. Fourth, the challenge to think of new business models. And these last 2 points, I think, are the most important things. I'm sorry, Bernard, I did not take your advice. The most important things I think I have to say, because this is thinking that has not yet been adopted in Europe, and it represents a very substantial opportunity. We've been too quickly trapped into the old paradigms of delivering a commodity to these fueling stations, and we need to think differently. We need to think entirely differently from a business model point of view. One positive example in this way is to look at what it means for a fueling station operator to operate and deliver fuel, and the California incentives have been positioned so that it looks at the normal return profile of a station operator and scales the incentives over time so they can realize their expected rates of return and be incentivized to participate in new fueling infrastructure, and it's been effective. But there are much more elements involved in the business model approach for this important area of infrastructure. And the delivery of energy storage and stabilization services to electrical grids represents a very substantial opportunity. We've already heard earlier today about the need of electrical grids to have greater stabilizing and storage services available as they deploy more renewable energy. And this is an absolutely complementary point with fueling infrastructure. If we look at the now prevalent situation in many areas of the world where excesses of renewable energy from wind and solar are being generated on a daily basis and usually given away or exported at negative pricing, we can see already the significant opportunity that's on the table now to migrate this energy, which is literally free or people will pay you to take it, and put that into the transportation system, because the temporal profile of our energy systems has completely changed, and now we have dynamics that give us this new opportunity to overcome the siloed effect of our energy systems. We need to think differently. By bringing together a large number of interconnected hydrogen fueling stations based on electrolysis technology, we not only meet an innovation challenge, but also the cost challenge and also the challenges associated with deploying more renewable energy. And so this brings us to the last challenge, the need to think more holistically and from an energy systems point of view about infrastructure. We continue to see fueling infrastructure as something that stands by itself, and that's the thinking that has to go away. We need a much more integrated view of our energy systems if we're going to make progress. And when I look for some positive example of this happening already in the world, it simply hasn't happened yet. There is a significant opportunity here to think differently and make significant progress. By the combination of storage and stabilization services with transportation, we realize the highest value vector for hydrogen that's available. Earlier there was discussion about putting hydrogen in the natural gas pipelines, something that we're working with E.ON in Germany to do with a project where we'll deliver 2 megawatts of energy storage in Falkenhagen, Germany in December of this year. Storage projects with hydrogen are proliferating at a very high rate, but we don't yet have the proper connection between the transportation system and these new storage regimes. What's interesting, in Germany, 2 of the large fueling stations are actually owned and operated by electric utilities. So the proper players are in place, but the assets are not yet being operated in a coordinated fashion to provide storage and stabilization services alongside the fueling. I used to build cars for a living, 1,000 cars a day. One of the small parts we put on a car was a shock absorber, fit up under the wheel, connecting the wheel and the body. It isn't an expensive part. And you wouldn't normally think of it as an as an important part of a car. But in fact, if your car had no shock absorber, you'd know in a big hurry. Your ride would be very uncomfortable, and your car wouldn't last as long, and you would have a lot of time in the maintenance shop. Our energy systems today need a shock absorber, and that's the system of storage and stabilization. And there's a direct connection between what we need to do in transportation fuel with this need in the electrical grid system. And it represents a major opportunity to bring new revenue streams to support the fueling infrastructure. Let me just illustrate with a couple more slides as I wrap up. The chart on the right-hand side of this slide comes from the largest natural gas distributor in North America, Enbridge, our partner for the deployment of the powered gas solution in North America. You would think with shale gas and all the rest it might have been a hard sell, but it wasn't. Because Enbridge recognizes that today our siloed system of thinking about energy between their heating system, our electrical system, and transportation system is the main impediment to making progress in our thinking. And in fact, if we are able to move energy as electrical power into gas and then into the transportation system, the walls start to come down and a whole new paradigm has started. And in fact, there's a tremendous virtuous cycle that arises here because our electrical systems need the dampening or shock absorbing capacity of energy storage systems. And there is no stronger vector than hydrogen to store and move the amount of energy that we need to move in our energy systems in the future when we get to very high penetrations of renewable energy. And so the more renewable energy we put on, the more that we use electrolysis type technology to absorb and shock absorb in the system, we have a virtuous cycle that will feed itself and be very beneficial, not just to fueling for transportation, but also to our electrical energy systems. So we've had the opportunity to work with many of you here in this room on projects around the world. It's been a privilege, and we think there's tremendous opportunity to move forward and adopt some fresh thinking here to enable the hydrogen infrastructure that we need and also solve other problems in tandem and the opportunity to actually do it on a cost-effective basis. We're ready to do that today. Thank you.
I'll just go ahead. Okay.
You know, Dennis, I knew you would do it without me, okay?
Okay.
So
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
You're a company that is called Intelligent Energy.
And it is. So,
let me thank you for coming.
thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. I'm going to talk to you about the H2 Mobility Program. It is work in progress at this moment, so therefore it's a snapshot of where things stand. And some of the background to it, you've already seen, heard, and been made aware of some of the activities, the H2 Mobility Program that's already taking place in Germany, the discussions that are leading towards a similar program here in France, in Scandinavia, in South Korea, and also in Japan, as just mentioned. The challenge that gets you from a few vehicles to start the hydrogen infrastructure that you need that, and the paradigm and the dilemma of how you actually manage that balance at most economic, advantageous terms to all of the players involved, not just one group, not just a few groups, but to all groups in order to make that happen. And it's easy to talk about, you would have seen from Ito-san's slide, it's that when you get to 2 million fuel cell electric vehicles in this particular case and 100,000 refueling stations, it's no longer the issue. The issue really is that first step. So it's taking the journey and that classic saying, it's always the first step. So how do we make that step in the United Kingdom? Go back 1 year, or a little bit over 1 year, the summer of 2011, it was very much around not just industry, but government coming to industry, looking to understand what industry was wanting to do across the component supply, understanding the utility-related implications, understanding the interface-related implications, looking at the basis of the UK automotive industry, the car companies that were there for manufacture, those that were bringing cars, and the concentration, of course, that the UK already has towards low-carbon vehicles, low-carbon technologies, and mandate and commitments to decarbonisation of the transportation sector. So you bring that together through a series of workshops, through statements of interest, and we move forward with a formal collaboration, a collaboration that involves 17 different companies, 3 government departments. It's actually chaired by the Office of Low Emission Vehicles, itself a collation across the Department for Transport and BIS. The car companies themselves, Daimler, Hyundai, Nissan, Honda, Toyota, and of course, being the UK, Tata, Jaguar, Land Rover. The hydrogen providers, together with utility, because that's important, it's already just been mentioned, that utilities are key to the play in looking to manage opportunities for the future. The fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking as part of that, and importantly for the UK, not the normal fuel companies, but retailers. A very large proportion of fuel is actually retailed at the pump by supermarkets rather than standard Shell, BP, Chevron, and so on. So having their understanding, involvement, and also looking at the way in which they work to satisfy supply of fuel requirements to their customers, we consider was critical. So part of the scheme, and also, as you'll see there, a lot of companies involved and a lot of companies further interviewed. The goal, fundamentally, it was around working out how to optimize that integration of the rollout strategy between vehicle supplier and fueling, and clearly against that backdrop of decarbonising surface transport, diversifying energy supply, critical also for the UK, and environmental benefits and health benefits. It is a stage-gated approach. We're just about coming to the end of phase 1. We did a first phase, 1A, which really was a due diligence. What is the nature of the constituency out there? Looking at geographical impacts, looking at assessment of vehicle supply markets, volumes, marry that against population densities, road networks, fuel supply options for hydrogen, how green hydrogen is at the moment, how green it could be for the future, and then rolling that from a first positive response at the end of the due diligence process into a more concise, quantified and qualified hydrogen rollout strategy that we're just coming towards the ends of. So by the end of this year, we'll be able to go public and give a lot more detail about what it actually looks like in real numbers and real terms, leading on to the intention to go to the stage that's already been referred to for Germany. What's the business case? And then how does it get funded and how does it actually get implemented? It's been done through a variety of work streams. There's been, I think, in a little different to Germany, we actually decided that it was essential in the UK perspective to put a lot of time into the voice of the customer. How are they going to play into, how do you need to overcome their barriers, their perceptions of barriers, and then economic determinants against different market segments, car-owning segments, population segments, and also how that plays out in different regions. Scotland is not the same as London. London is not the same as Cardiff in Wales. It may be the same in other areas, but it's definitely the case in the UK. The hydrogen fuel production and distribution, what's the roadmap in terms of capabilities, what needs to be done, where would you put the hydrogen refueling stations, and then what's the vehicle ramp-up scenarios going to actually look like. So as a consequence of the work streams and the activities that have been undertaken, a lot of very detailed quantitative and qualitative market assessment information, particular detail around the options for the rollout strategies on the hydrogen refueling station, very detailed assessment in an information system modeling and the like, and then production and supply roadmap in order to be able to get to the initial rollout scenarios. I should make the point that McKinsey has been appointed by the UKH Mobility team and are paid in order to be able to undertake those assessments, lead the work where it's involved and required, and that's essentially in all areas, a lot of detailed confidential information about different costs, different production alternatives, different rollout strategies and so on. That's been done through a clean team process by the McKinsey partners. So how's it going to look like? What's the rollout approach going to be? It's around a process of clearly matching the vehicle supply to the marketplace, to the customers, and the process of nucleation. You're not going to try and find a broad spread of hydrogen refueling infrastructure. You're going to look to satisfy key markets first, roll out from those key markets, infill in order to be able to satisfy the requirements. And that certainly has some economic implications, of course. It clearly means that in some areas you are probably going to need to build hydrogen refueling stations that you will know will be suboptimal to the requirement in the early years. And that comes back to the same sets of issues that have been faced in Germany and elsewhere. How do you overcome that? It's an answer that we'll have to address in the next stage around the business models. As it's already been identified again for Canada. Maybe there's some new thinking involved around that, but it's a simple fact that you do need to make that critical first stage investment, possibly similar to Canada, where they said we need about 65 refueling stations as an investment just to be able to get the process underway, and that would be in particular nodal points in key segments, in key cities, and then be able to roll out from there. So that's part of the thinking. We know that you'll have the Tier 1 locations covered by 2020. You'll be extending that by refueling of coverage of up to 70% of the population, 2025. By 2030, essentially you've covered the key markets and the key populations. Clearly, within that, it's linking the hydrogen refueling station deployment with the sales to minimize the low utilization risk, but you have to do that still to meet customer need. If you haven't met the customer requirement where they have made it absolutely clear, driving more than X kilometers, X miles, being close to more than just one refueling station makes an enormous difference in what would be considered the price premium for the vehicle. It actually can be quantified as in effect, an advantage, a cost advantage to the customer in order to be able to have that, and that therefore speeds the uptake of the vehicles themselves. So how have we arrived now? Looking at the broader opportunities, it's across the entire value chain. It's around using this process that is in the early stages, assisting in the creation of that multi-billion-pound hydrogen market for transportation, utilizing the assets and capacities to extend business applications around the refueling, looking at and paying attention to the additional demand for electricity, renewable, green, taking advantages of the benefits to the wider energy system in load balancing and the like, industry standards, fast tracking, security of return, absolutely critical to the industry players that are going to need to invest, and obviously, of course, the final benefit to the customer, not just in the mobility aspect, but also the environmental and the health aspects of decarbonising that would be achieved through this program. Thank you.
Clearly, this session showed that people are moving ahead very fast, and that really, we are really now talking about real business. I think this is very important because most of you in the audience always ask a question, should I write a new report to explain why hydrogen is important? I think the message here conveyed by everybody is, what are you talking about? You're talking about the past. You know, dinosaur time is over. Lasted 200 million years, that's right, but we're in a new phase. And I think it's important that you convey that from really this meeting, because it's important to realize we are in a new era. And the problem is to learn from all these people. I'm just saying that because I'm afraid that the question session will be short, but remember what they told you, because everything I know was within these talks. And you see they're different, every context is different, but I think that this is something great. Now I open the floor for a question, but I have a first question to Klaus. Klaus, it's no secret, I don't see much really deployment in France. Give us a little advice. What could we do to link, you know, France and Germany, which is, you know, my favorite thing, you know. For years I thought that this is one of the great achievements, and I'm glad we had really all Europe the prize for peace, because France and Germany is really an example of really things that were not thinkable 50 years ago. So now it's over, and I think that it's time to link really France and Germany with hydrogen, because this seems to be a border.
Well, I really like the Franco-Allemande friendship, but it's not for me to give an advice, it's just for me to maybe analyze a few things. First of all, we heard this morning from a company here in France, Air Liquide, from their CEO that they're committed to hydrogen. So there is an interest of industry to do these things also here in France. Looking at the car companies, I think there were some clear signals from the Paris Auto Show that indeed even the French companies now start to look into fuel cells as being a viable option for the future. So of course it does need industry being in a position to move forward on these things. Now, as I've outlined, it's not enough to do this just here and there, and even Germany is a big market. We need the European market, and we really need to make sure, and you know German people like France, that we are in a position to actually travel across our borders, that we travel across Europe with a fuel cell vehicle, with hydrogen. So, you know, starting with an initial network, really connecting the key corridors throughout Europe, including, of course, France, I think is key and is something what I expect would be an outcome of the 10T activities that we're now starting. So this, for the very first time, is really going beyond this R&D stage, really moving forward and trying to identify a European picture, and again with Germany and France being, you know, centrally in Europe, big countries, there's every good reason to get started in France as well.
Thank you very much, and now I open this, you know, session to questions from the floor, and I cannot see much, so really raise your hand, shout, do something, you know, waving like that.
Yeah, it's me again, Uwe Dietrich, Kutek Institute. I have a question to Mr. Ito, because you had a pretty impressive progress of your micro CHP program, as I see. The intention was to implement 9,000 units this fiscal year, and you outreach that by 2,000 or 3,000. And my question is, what is the driving force behind that? The driving force. Is there a monetary value for the end users? Do they make money with implementing a fuel cell? That's my question.
Okay, thank you for your question about the motivation for the users to introduce the residential fuel cell at the home. It is for energy saving, in fact. Okay. So due to the high efficiency of energy usage, they can save the OPEX of natural gas payment for natural gas and electric power. So that's the motivation for the end users to introduce NFARM to the home.
Other questions?
Actually, also a question to Mr. Andreas Friedrich from German Aerospace Center. I have actually a question to Mr. Ito-san. You introduced now the residential fuel cell systems with an impressive subsidy program. Are you planning a similar thing for the fuel cell cars? And if not, what would be the approach there?
Okay, thank you for the question about FCB subsidy. At the moment, there is not any discussion or any plan which is apparent. Therefore, nobody knows what will happen.
You know, this is what I call real progress, because to have a Japanese telling you that bluntly, like that, you know, we're in shape. You know, the world is something, you know, I never got such a straight answer. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yes, I am Claude Lamy. I am representative of the Institute of Chemistry of CNRS, our National Scientific Research Center. I would like to ask some question or one question to Darrell Wilson. Yes, about the production of hydrogen by electrolysis. It's a very, very nice process. But I have heard about that it's a little bit more expensive than steam methane reforming. So can you tell us about the price of, say, 1 kilo of hydrogen? And in that price, what is the part of the material, the equipment, the electrolyzer, and the price of the electricity, more or less? If you can say us something about that.
Yes, thank you for your question, and an important question around the economics of this particular pathway. What I tried to explain in the talk is that when we look at the economics of a new approach, we cannot use our old thinking and say this device makes this commodity and we merely need to add up the cost of the device and the inputs and calculate the resulting cost of the commodity. Because a holistic and integrated view of electrolysis in an energy system which desperately needs shock absorbing, stabilizing, and storage attributes is a different total business than just supplying a commodity. It's also the supply of services. There are 6 different business models that support the approach of power to gas, moving electrons to hydrogen. And they all have different attributes, but the one that has the most promise of the greatest economics is actually the fueling pathway. And if you properly allocate the value of providing stabilization and storage systems to the electrical grid as part of those inputs and outputs in the total business model, you end up with different answers than I know many of you sitting there today are saying, well, you know, we always knew electrolysis was expensive. And compared to natural gas, it's very, very much more expensive. This is narrow, siloed thinking. And what we're talking about here is the blend of energy services, which are desperately needed by the electrical grid, therefore they pay for those services, along with the delivery of commodity together. And when that view is taken, we believe, with some ongoing innovation, it is possible to deliver hydrogen fuel within the targets that have been discussed here in Europe on a pure green pathway. So I don't have time just now to get into all the details. I'm happy to chat with anybody about this in more detail, but I think the principle is to recognize that we're not just talking about a piece of hardware to deliver a commodity, hydrogen gas. We're talking about an energy system which includes the delivery of services and the commodity together, and on that basis, it's cost effective.
very happy with your answer. But let's say, let's take one refueling station in Germany, for example. For the customer with a fuel cell electrical vehicle, he will buy 1 kilo of hydrogen. What is the cost? It's a very important question.
I am told that your target cost here is somewhat less than 10 euros per kilogram, correct? Okay. So what I'm saying here is that with the deployment of an alternative business model, clusters of station operating as part of the energy system, it's possible for me to sell electrolyzers and make a profit. It's possible for the operator of those electrolyzers to sell hydrogen gas and make a profit. And it's possible to keep the price of hydrogen below 10 euros per kilogram. Yes. This is all possible. So there are a number of requirements to make this situation so, but they are not insurmountable.
Yes, in that price, what is the part of the electricity, for example? It depends of the state, of course. In Canada, you have...
Claude, I love this conversation, but Darrell will be happy to talk to you with a coffee, because I think it will be endless, okay? But it's an interesting question, okay? Other questions? Don't be shy. Nobody wants... So I would like to really thank the speakers for this.
Sorry.
I knew someone will come back.
Yes, I have a question to Darrell as well. It's a nice picture to link the task of grid stability to the fueling of cars. But how to make this both balance? The one difference I see is the order of magnitude. We are talking about terawatts versus kilowatts. The other is location. Where do we need the hydrogen for the cars? And the other is timing. When do we need, and how, I think timing is the easiest because you can store. But how to make the link between the other two issues?
So our energy systems today, you know this very well in Germany, are challenged from the standpoint that we're able to generate energy in one location and we need it in other locations. So there is gaps in the spatial relationships and gaps in the time relationships. As the Danish speaker shared with us this morning, the first approach to mitigate this problem is to strengthen the grid, just make the wires thicker. Eventually, those jurisdictions which have gone that pathway, and it's happened in California, and it's happened in Denmark, and it's happened to some extent in Germany, eventually you reach the end of that paradigm and say, this doesn't make sense anymore. By the deployment of flexible assets in the electrical grid system, you now have the stabilization that you need. And it is certainly a planning exercise to put those assets where they are needed, but the nice thing about electrical grids is that they are interconnected and you don't need to land the electrolyzer exactly in the place where there is surplus energy generation. And certainly if you're charging the fueling station overnight, Germany has a lot of capacity, as an example, to move power from the north to the south at night. The bottlenecks on the electrical grid system happen in the middle of the day. And so, part of the coordination and planning here is certainly looking at things in time and space in a lot of detail. One of the things we found talking to some of the most advanced modeling capable folks in North America is even this modeling approach that's required from a time point of view is not fully established. Typical electrical system grid modeling is done today on 4-hour segments. What we're talking about here would be down to minute segments, a very different scale of modeling to understand the optimization of the grid. But what we're proposing here is entirely practical and possible, but it takes the vision to work, as you said, at a much larger scale rather than one station at a time in single projects, and look at a coordinated regional approach.
We should move to coffee. So, thanks to all our speakers, please.